Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Mackenzie and this is Mackenzie Reads. Today I'm doing a really exciting video. I've got my Christmas pajamas on and I am ready to share 7 books that I think that you need to read. Why wait to be happy? There's just so much hope in this book. Are you shocked? No, it is one of the most heartbreaking, gut-wrenching stories I think I've ever read. I love when there's cute dogs in books. I almost feel like I watched these books as a movie. While we're going into that week between Christmas and New Year's, where it's the end of 2025 and maybe you're trying to hit your reading goal for the year, or you feel like you're in a little bit of a slump, or you have a little bit more free time where you're relaxing, just need some good book recommendations, I'm going to recommend some. Some of them you've probably heard of, some of them you may not have heard of, and I tried to have books in most genres that I've read, and I tried to make them a little bit different. So this is all of the books that I'm going to recommend, and let's get going. All right, so let's start with our first book recommendation, and that first book is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. First of all, I'm obsessed with this cover, this special edition. This was the Barnes & Noble special edition. I don't know how I feel about these edges. This foiling and the periodic table on this is amazing and very on brand for the story. I also love when books have this built-in bookmark attachment. So anyways, so this book was my favorite book that I read in 2023, and I've actually read it twice. I reread it again last year in 2024, and it follows the chemist Elizabeth Zott in the 1960s. So she's a woman chemist, which is pretty much unheard of at the time, and I just think it is such an amazing coming of age story for women. I think that everyone should read this book at some point in their life, even if you're not somebody who ever learned science or was into science. However, if you are very interested in science or in a science field, I think you're going to love this book even more. However, it's written in a way that's very digestible for the average Jane, I would say. Essentially, Elizabeth is on this all-male research team at this prestigious chemist institute. She's not taken seriously. Are you shocked? Are you shocked? No. She's a woman. It's the 1960s. Women were made to be home with the kids, and Elizabeth has never wanted that life. She's just so matter of fact. All she cares about is science and doing things at the molecular level. So essentially she gets forced out of her dream chemistry career due to a bunch of unforeseen and terrible circumstances that unfortunately many women have to face, and she ends up with a TV show called Supper at 6, where she cooks every single day on television on a live cooking show. Elizabeth, being a chemist, turns the show into her way of empowering women across America. So this is such a great story for women if you want to feel empowered, if you want to feel like you're not alone, you're not the only one who struggled with inequality in the workplace, in life. Also, if you want to feel inspired, if you do choose to be somebody who stays at home and takes care of their family. What I love about this book so much is Elizabeth makes it so that it seems possible for every woman in every walk of life. There's also a dog in this book, and I won't tell you their name, but I love when there's cute dogs in books, and this one has the most creative name I've ever seen a dog in a book. So I highly recommend this book for everyone, but especially for women to read. Also, I just want to read this little tiny blurb on the back of the book. Her catchphrase, Elizabeth's, was, "Your ability to change everything, including yourself, starts here." I'm obsessed with this book. This is such a good book to start off this video with. I gave this book 6 stars. I don't think it could get any better. So please add Lessons in Chemistry to your list. All right, the next book that we're going to talk about actually has a TV show adaptation, and I don't think that this is a very popularized book. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really see a lot of people reading this. None other than We Were the Lucky Ones by Georgia Hunter. This book even if this is historical fiction, however, the author, Georgia Hunter, she's got a big blurb in the back where she talks about how this story is very much based on her grandparents' story and how they survived the Holocaust. So essentially, this family, I don't know how to say the last name, I say the Kirk, Kurc family. It's a story of how generations of one family, how they were able to survive and what they had to do and the ends that they had to go to survive the Holocaust, and how even if you're torn apart as a family, you can still come back together. This book will have you crying. This book will have you gasping. This book, it's literally written on the front, will leave you breathless. It's so inspiring to see how resilient human beings can be, and you just have to imagine that her family must be some of the strongest people imaginable because of what they had to face. This was her debut novel, and I believe she just wanted to tell her family's story in a way that could be digestible. So the amount of research and time that went into writing this, I can't even imagine. I highly recommend also reading the author's note at the end of the book when you do read this. And the title being We Were the Lucky Ones really shows you how deep this book is and how one family is able to make it through arguably one of the hardest times that we've ever had in the world. So even if you're somebody who doesn't love to read historical fiction, I still would highly recommend reading this book. It had a way of, it was very gripping and it just keeps you turning the pages. And this is a book that I've recommended to my dad, to my mom, to grandparents, to friends, to coworkers. Like, this is a book that I think everyone should read. So I highly recommend We Were the Lucky Ones. So now we are going to bring up the mood a little bit, and I'm going to recommend possibly my favorite ever romance, also possibly my favorite ever romance author, and that is none other than Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. I genuinely don't know what Annabelle put into this book, but it has to be crack because her writing is very snappy. It has no frills, which makes it really easy to fly through her books. I think every one of her books I've read within a day or two. She typically writes about women going through a hard time in their life. So for example, this book follows Allie, who is going through a divorce. Not only do the women in her books find love and happiness, but they also come back to themselves. So no matter what they've been through, it just brings you through this beautiful story of her finding herself as well as love. And I love how cut and dry her titles are, like just Summer Romance, See You Next Summer, Nora Goes Off Script. They're very to the point, and like this to me is the epitome of a summer romance. Like, I picture reading this, you sit down on the beach at 10 a.m. and you binge it in 5-6 hours, and you go home and you have a sunburn and you have this beautiful new book in your mind. So I highly recommend this if you're going on a vacation anytime soon in the winter time, or you want to save this for the winter, or you just want to feel those summer vibes. This book, I can't recommend it enough. And this book also has a cute little doggy in it. So actually a couple dogs. Also, this has one of the most hilarious meet cutes I've ever read in a romance book. So you're just gonna have to read it to find out. Okay, so the next book I'm gonna recommend is a non-fiction. I felt like I had to recommend one. I think what sets a good non-fiction book apart for me is when it's something that you will, or you're able to go back to read small passages from to gain inspiration. And this also might be the smallest book that I've ever seen. So this book, this little tiny book, is called The Pocket. And this is by, I do not know how to say this guy's name, Thich Nhat Hanh. Hopefully I said that right. This author has a lot of books that he's written. This one, however, the reason why I would recommend anyone to read it is no matter your beliefs, your spirituality, I think that there is something for everyone in this little book. I find that it's a book that I want to reach for if I do need that motivation and inspiration. It has beautiful words, and you can just tell that this is culmination of this man's life's work and all of the enlightenment and epiphanies that he's had in his life are in this little tiny book that you literally could fit in your pocket. Hence why I think it's called The Pocket. I found myself when I was reading this, I was constantly highlighting, and it's a book that there's just so much hope in this book, and I think it really just brings you back to the simplicities of life. And I think this would be such a good book, honestly, going into the new year, just to read a little bit each day to kind of give you perspective on life and on what actually matters and maybe what doesn't actually matter. I want to read a couple of the quotes that I've underlined so that you can kind of see what his writing is like. So, for example, this is in the Enlightenment chapter. Be yourself. Life is precious as it is. All the elements for your happiness are already here. There is no need to run, strive, search, or struggle. Just be. And then the next one is, the purpose of a rose is to be a rose. Your purpose is to be yourself. The next is, you are here for life. And if you are here for life, life will be here for you. It's simple. Why wait to be happy? And then, many people in our society are not happy, even though the conditions for their happiness already exist. That's a powerful one. I really think that this book would be good for anyone who's feeling down about their life, who maybe wants to go into the new year practicing gratitude, and just anybody who feels like they need perspective on what really truly matters. This is a book that you can throw in your bag, throw in your purse, bring with you to work. You can put it on your night table, read a little chapter each morning, each night. I think this is a book that's meant to be read and reread and reread. I think you could flip to any page in this book and find something meaningful and something that applies to what you're going through right now. So yeah, The Pocket. I highly recommend. So for our next book, we have technically another historical fiction. However, this goes way back to Greek mythology, so I'm sure many of you have probably heard of this book. This author also has an even more popular book called The Song of Achilles. So the book that I'm recommending is Circe by Madeline Miller. First of all, if you've read The Song of Achilles and you liked it, you need to read this book. I personally think Circe is a little bit better than The Song of Achilles, and I loved The Song of Achilles. I was obsessed with it. I thought it had twists and turns. Even though it was history, I feel like I never really knew what was going to happen, and that's the same with Circe. I think that Circe's story is not one that I personally was very familiar with going into this, and I just think this is, again, another amazing women's coming of age novel. So essentially what happens is Zeus banishes Circe to live on this island all on her own. And while she's living on this island, she sees and she meets countless people who come to her shores through shipwreck, searching aid. Also talks about the danger of just being a woman alone in the middle of the sea on an island all by yourself. And it just shows Circe's mental battles between the mortals that she's come to know and to love through her time on Earth and the gods from which she was born from. So she has this internal debate going on throughout most of the story where she's trying to decide if she really truly belongs where she was born with the gods, or if she belongs with the mortals on the real world. So I feel like this is such a good book that introduces you to so many different Greek mythology characters, but it's told in such a different way from this woman's point of view. So if you're feeling like you want to feel inspired or you want to learn more about Greek mythology, I highly, highly recommend reading Circe, especially if you love The Song of Achilles. We are on our second to last book, and I actually don't own a physical copy of this one. So this is actually a series that I read in 2023. It's a fantasy series. It has 3 books, and it is somewhat popular. However, I don't think it's nearly as popular as things like ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, Fourth Wing. It's definitely not on those levels. And that book is Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. This is actually one of my favorite fantasy romance series. I rated all 3 books a 5-star. Specifically, actually, once you get into the second book, there's a new character introduced that I was obsessed with. And in the first book, there's this story reveal about the MMC that it is one of the most heartbreaking, gut-wrenching stories I think I've ever read for this character's development, and the fact that Max, the male main character, was able to still remain a good person after going through that just blows my mind. And then Tisana, the female main character, she's a former slave whose entire life goal is to abolish slavery in their lands. So essentially, Tisana wants to join the Orders, which is this group of magic wielders in their kingdom, but in order to do so, she has to succeed at and do an apprenticeship with Max, who has become a recluse, who's living out. In my mind, I picture this beautiful little stone home surrounded by wildflowers and buzzing bees, and the imagery in this book, I don't know what it is about the way that Carissa Broadbent writes, but I had such a vivid picture of everything going on in this book in my mind, to the point where I almost feel like I watched these books as a movie. I read them over 2 years ago, and I can still picture in my mind every single one of these scenes. And to me, that's the definition of good writing. I think that these are addictive. I almost feel like I watched these books as a movie. If you're somebody who wants a fast-paced series where you can just boom, 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 fly through it, you can be entertained. There's very, very, very high stakes. There's a lot of plot twists. There's so many plot twists in this story that I absolutely never saw coming. Essentially, it's all for the greater good and Tisana trying to abolish slavery because she came from slavery. So the romance in this is one of my favorites. The characters are one of my favorites. I'm obsessed with Max. He's one of my favorite male main characters. Again, his story has my heart, and I highly, highly recommend that series to you if you're somebody who's read some of the more popularized fantasy romances and you're wanting a little bit more. It's also on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, I believe all 3 books are on there. So they'd be a really good series for you to binge on your Kindle. All right, so we are on to our very last book, which honestly, I think this might be one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I gave it 6 stars. I need to reread this book. I annotated this book within an inch of its life, and I'm not really a big annotator. I don't annotate much. This book is none other than The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I don't even know why this book touched me so deeply, but something about this story is just so heartbreaking and yet inspiring. So essentially, this story is about Addie LaRue, who gets cursed by a devil so that nobody that she comes in contact to will ever remember her. So she could walk into a room, say hi, meet somebody, walk out to use the restroom, walk back in, and they wouldn't know who she was. She could go into a store and she could grab something, walk out, and by the time she's gone, they wouldn't even remember that she was there stealing things. No photographs could be taken of her, no paintings could be drawn of her, and it essentially just follows this girl's life and shows you that even if you can't be remembered, you can still make an impact and an imprint on other people's lives. She also lives forever. She's essentially, I think she's essentially immortal, and her initial curse happens in France in 1714, and then you follow her through her journey all the way up until almost present time, 300 years later, so 2014, and she stumbles into a bookstore in, I believe it's in New York City, and there's a boy there who remembers her, and she has not been remembered for over 300 years. She's literally never met one person that will continue to remember her. This is a book that just makes you think. It makes you appreciate every single person that you have in your life. It makes you understand how important your personal connections are. If you lost every single person that you knew, I can't even imagine how alone you would feel. This book also has one of the most unpredictable endings I've ever read personally. It absolutely shattered my heart. I cried, and if you know anything about me, I do not cry reading books ever. I could count on one hand how many books I've cried to, and this is one of them. It is a book that you're going to want to underline, and you're going to want to share with your friends and your family. I want to read some of my favorite quotes. So this first one on page 77, "It is sad, of course, to forget, but it is a lonely thing to be forgotten. There are whole stretches when the world seems to empty around her, as if an artist drew the barest lines of the landscape, then turned, distracted from the task." Funny how some people take an age to warm and others simply walk into every room as if it's home. She can go without food. She will not wither. She can go without heat. The cold will not kill her. But a life without art, without wonder, without beautiful things, she would go mad. She has gone mad. What she needs are stories. Books, she has found, are a way to live 1,000 lives or to find strength in a very long one. And that's a great quote to end on. This is the perfect mix of a bingeable and yet intellectual story where you'll feel like you're gaining knowledge and increasing your worldview while also not reading a book that is too hard to understand. You have to read this book. It's so good. All right, guys, so that is the end of my 7 books that I recommend that you should read from my library. If you've read any of these and you liked them, let me know. Or if there's any of these books that you are interested in or you want to read, you're gonna go pick up, also let me know. I would love to hear your opinions on these books. Don't think you can hurt my feelings because I totally understand that we all have different tastes with different books. I hope that you give one of these books a try. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe and join me over here on Mackenzie Reads. I'm having a blast filming all these videos, and I hope that you're having fun watching all of these Vlogmas videos. I couldn't think of a better way to kickstart my YouTube journey. So I hope that you're having fun. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. So go get on your Christmas pajamas, maybe grab one of these books, curl up with a nice cup of hot chocolate or tea, and thank you so much for being here. Okay, bye.